Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Parivrajrakacharya Ashtotara Shata Shri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki. Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Parivrajrakacharya Ashtotara Shata Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki. Ananta Goti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki. Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki. Prem Sakaho, Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath, Shamakund, Radhakund, Giri Govardhan Ki, Vrindavan Dham Ki, Mathura Dham Ki, Navadvip Dham Ki, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki, Bhakti Devi Ki, Tulasi Devi Ki, Yamuna Mai Ki, Ganga Mai Ki, Samavata Bhakta Vrinda Ki. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga.
Namaste Narasimhaya, Namaste Narasimhaya, Namaste Narasimhaya, Namaste Narasimhaya, Praladalada Daine, Praladalada Daine, Praladalada Daine, Praladalada Daine, Hiranya Kasipurvakshaha, Hiranya Kasipurvakshaha, Hiranyakasipurvakshaha, Hiranyakasipurvakshaha, Shilatanka Nakalaye, Shilatanka Nakalaye, Ito Narsimha, Parato Narsimha, Ito Narsimha, Parato Narsimha, Yato yato yami tato Narsimha, Yato yato yami tato Narsimha, Pahe Narsimha, उदये नरसिंह बाहे नरसिंह उदये नरसिंह नारसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये शरणं प्रपद्ये तव करकमलवरे नाकाम् अद्भुत शृङ्गां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गां केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे तव करकमलवरे नाकाम् अद्भुत शृङ्गां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गां केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय जय श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय।
Transcendental poets and experts in spiritual science could not fully express their indebtedness to you, even if they were to have a long lifetime on. For you appear in two features, externally as the Acharya and internally as the super soul, to deliver the embodied living being directed by him how to come to you. Purport. This verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 11:29-6 was spoken by Sri Uddhava after he heard from Sri Krishna all necessary instructions about yoga. 49. Tesham Sakati Yuktam Nam Vijatam Translation. Constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Purport. This verse of Bhagavad Gita 10:10 clearly states how Govinda Dev instructs his bona fide devotee. The Lord declares that by enlightenment and theistic knowledge, he awards attachment for him to those who constantly engage in his transcendental loving service. This awakening of divine consciousness enthralls the devotee who thus relishes his eternal transcendental mellow. Such an awakening is awarded only to those convinced by devotional service about the transcendental nature of the personality of Godhead. They know that the supreme truth, the all-spiritual and the all-powerful person, is one without a second and has fully transcendental senses. He is the fountainhead of all emanations. Such pure devotees, always merged in knowledge of Krishna and absorbed in Krishna consciousness, exchange thoughts and realizations as great scientists exchange their views and discuss the results of their research in scientific academies. Such exchanges of thoughts in regard to Krishna give pleasure to the Lord, who therefore favors such devotees with all enlightenment. Ita Brahmane Bhagavan Swayam Upadeshyanu Bhavitavan. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Swayam Bhagavan Tat Brahma and made himself realized. Purport. The English maxim that God helps those who help themselves is also applicable in the transcendental realm. There are many instances in the revealed scripture of the personality of Godhead's acting as a spiritual master from within. The personality of Godhead was the spiritual master who instructed Brahma, the original living being in the cosmic creation. When Brahma was first created, he could not apply his creative energy to arrange the cosmic situation. At first, there was only sound, vibrating the word tapa, which indicates the acceptance of hardships for spiritual realization. Refraining from sensual enjoyment, one should voluntarily accept all sorts of difficulties for spiritual realization. This is called tapasya. An enjoyer of the senses can never realize God, godliness, or the science of theistic knowledge. Thus, when Brahma, initiated by Sri Krishna by the sound vibration tapa, engaged himself in acts of austerity, by the pleasure of Vishnu, he was able to visualize the transcendental world, Vaikuntha, Sri Vaikuntha, through transcendental realization. Modern science can communicate using material discoveries such as radio, television, and computers, but the science invoked by the austerities of Sri Brahma, the original father of mankind, was still more subtle. In time, material scientists may also know how we can communicate with the Vaikuntha world. Lord Brahma inquired about the potency of the Supreme Lord, and the personality of Godhead answered his inquiry in the following 6 consecutive statements. These instructions, which are reproduced from Srimad Bhagavatam 2:931-36, were imparted by the personality of Godhead, acting as the supreme spiritual master.
Yanam Paramaguyam me Yad Vigyanam Samanvitam Sa Rahasyam Tad Angyam Cha Prahanam Gaditam Maya. Translation. Please hear attentively what I shall speak to you, for transcendental knowledge about me is not only scientific, but also full of mysteries. End quote. Purport. Transcendental knowledge of Sri Krishna is deeper than the impersonal knowledge of Brahman, for it includes knowledge of not only his form and personality, but also everything else related to him. There is nothing in existence not related to Sri Krishna. In a sense, there is nothing but Sri Krishna, and yet nothing is Sri Krishna, save and except his primeval personality. This knowledge constitutes a complete transcendental science, and Vishnu wanted to give Brahmaji full knowledge about the science. The mystery of this knowledge culminates in personal attachment to the Lord, with the resulting effect of detachment from anything, quote, non-Krishna. There are 9 alternative transcendental means of attaining this stage: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, worshiping, praying, assisting, fraternizing with the Lord, and sacrificing everything for him. These are different parts of the same devotional service, which is full of transcendental mystery. The Lord said to Brahma that since he was pleased with him, by his grace the mystery was being revealed. Text 52. Yavan aham yata bhavo yad rupa guna karma kaha tat aiva tatva vigyanam astu te mad anugrahat. Translation. Quote, by my causeless mercy, be enlightened in truth about my personality, manifestations, qualities, and pastimes. End quote. Purport. The transcendental personal forms of the Lord are a mystery, and the symptoms of these forms, which are absolutely different from anything made of mundane elements, are also mysterious. The innumerable forms of the Lord, such as Shyamasundar, Narayan, Rama, and Gaura Sundar, the colors of these forms, white, red, yellow, cloud-like, Shama, and others, his qualities as the responsive personality of Godhead, pure devotees, and as personal Brahman to dry speculators. His uncommon activities like lifting Govardhan Hill, marrying more than 16,000 queens at Dwarka, and entering the Rasa dance with the damsels of Raj, expanding himself in as many forms as there were damsels in the dance, these and innumerable other uncommon acts are attributes are all mysteries, one aspect of which is presented in the scientific knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. This is read and adored all over the world by all classes of scholars, with as many interpretations as there are empiric philosophers. The truth of these mysteries was revealed to Brahma by the descending process without the help of the ascending one. The Lord's mercy descends to a devotee like Brahma did, and through Brahma to Narada, from Narada to Vyas, from Vyasadev to Shukadev, and so on, in the bona fide chain of disciplic succession. We cannot discover the mysteries of the Lord by our mundane endeavors. They are only revealed by his grace to the proper devotees. These mysteries are gradually disclosed to the various grade of devotees in proportion to the gradual development of their service attitude. In other words, impersonalists who depend upon the strength of their poor fund of knowledge and morbid speculative habits without submission and service in the forms of hearing, chanting, and the others mentioned above, cannot penetrate to the mysterious region of transcendence where the supreme truth is a transcendental person, free from all tinges of the material elements, discovering the mystery of the Lord eliminates the impersonal feature realized by common spiritualists who are merely trying to enter the spiritual region from the mundane platform.
Aham evasam evagre nanyad yatsarasat param paschadaham yad itachcha yovashishyeta somsyaham. Prior to the cosmic creation, only I exist, and no phenomena exist, either gross, subtle, or primordial. After creation, only I exist in everything, and after annihilation, only I remain eternally. Purport. Aham means I. Therefore, the speaker who is saying aham, I, must have his own personality. The Mayavadi philosophers interpret this word aham as referring to the impersonal Brahman. The Mayavadis are proud, very proud, of their grammatical knowledge. But any person who has actual knowledge of grammar can understand that aham means I, and that I refers to a personality. Therefore, the personality of Godhead speaking to Brahma uses aham while describing his own transcendental form. Aham has a specific meaning. It is not a vague term that can be whimsically interpreted. Aham, when spoken by Krishna, refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and nothing else. Before the creation and after its dissolution, only the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his associates exist. There is no existence of the material elements. This is confirmed in the Vedic literature. Vasudevo va idam agra asin na brahma na cha shankaraha. The meaning of this mantra is that before creation there was no existence of Brahma or Shiva, for only Vishnu existed. Vishnu exists in his abode, the Vaikunthas. There are innumerable Vaikuntha planets in the spiritual sky, and on each of them, Vishnu resides with his associates and his paraphernalia. It is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that although the creation is periodically dissolved, there is another abode, which is never dissolved. The word creation refers to the material creation because in the spiritual world, everything exists eternally. There is no creation or dissolution. The Lord indicates herein that before the material creation, he existed in fullness with all transcendental opulences, including all strength, all wealth, all beauty, all knowledge, all fame, and all renunciation. If one thinks of a king, he automatically thinks of his secretaries, ministers, military commanders, palaces, and so on. Since a king has such opulences, one can simply try to imagine the opulences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the Lord says aham, therefore, it is to be understood that he exists with full potency, including all opulences. The word yad refers to Brahman, the impersonal effulgence of the Lord. In the Brahma Samhita 5.40, it is said, Tad Brahma Nishkalam Anantam Ashesha Bhutam. The Brahman effulgence expands unlimitedly, just as the sun is a localized planet with the sunshine expanding unlimitedly from that source. So the absolute truth is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with his effulgence of energy, Brahman, expanding unlimitedly. From that Brahman energy, the creation appears, just as a cloud appears in sunshine. From the cloud comes rain. From the rain comes vegetation. And from vegetation comes fruits and flowers, which are the basis of subsistence for many other forms of life. Similarly, the effulgent bodily luster of the Supreme Lord is the cause of the creation of infinite universes. The Brahman effulgence is impersonal, but the cause of that energy is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. From him, in his abode, the Vaikunthas, this Brahmajyoti emanates. He is never impersonal. Since impersonalists cannot understand the source of the Brahman energy, they mistakenly choose to think this impersonal Brahman the ultimate or absolute goal. But as stated in the Upanishads, one has to penetrate the impersonal effulgence to see the face of the Supreme Lord. If one desires to reach the source of the sunshine, he has to travel through the sunshine to reach the sun and then meet the predominating deity there. The absolute truth is the Supreme Person, Bhagavan, as Srimad Bhagavatam explains. Sat means effect, asat means cause, and param refers to the ultimate truth, which is transcendental to cause and effect. The cause of the creation is called the Mahat Tattva, or total material energy, and its effect is the creation itself. But neither cause nor effect existed in the beginning. They emanated from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as did the energy of time.
Should I continue? This is stated in the Vedanta Sutra, Janma de asya yataha. The source of birth of the cosmic manifestation or Mahat Tattva is the personality of Godhead. This is confirmed throughout Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita 10.8, the Lord says, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki Jai. In the Bhagavad Gita 10.8, the Lord says, Aham sarvasya prabhavaha. I am the fountainhead of all emanations. The material cosmos, being temporary, is sometimes manifest and sometimes unmanifest, but its energy emanates from the Supreme Absolute Lord. Before the creation, there was neither cause nor effect, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead existed with his full opulence and energy. The words Paschadaham indicates that the Lord exists after the dissolution of the cosmic manifestation. When the material world is dissolved, the Lord still exists personally in the Vaikunthas. During the creation of the Lord, during the creation, Lord also exists and he is in the Vaikunthas and he also exists as the super soul within the material universes. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita 5.37. Goloka eva nivashati. Although he is perfectly and eternally present in Goloka Vrindavan and Vaikuntha, he is nevertheless all-pervading. Akhilatma Bhutaha. The all-pervading feature of the Lord is called the Super Soul. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said, Aham kritnasya aham kritchasya jagataha prabhavaha. The cosmic manifestation is a display of the energy of the Supreme Lord. The material elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, display the inferior energy of the Lord, and the living entities are his superior energy. Since the energy of the Lord is not different from him, in fact, everything that exists in Krishna in his impersonal feature, let me just read it again. Since the energy of the Lord is not different from him, in fact, everything that exists in Krishna in his impersonal feature, sunshine, sunlight, and heat are not different from the sun, and yet simultaneously they are distinct energies of the sun. Similarly, the cosmic manifestation and the living entities are the energies of the Lord, and they are considered to be simultaneously one with and different from him. The Lord therefore says, I am everything, because everything is his energy and is therefore non-different from him. Yo vasishyeta so smyam aham indicates that the Lord is the balance that exists after the dissolution of the creation. The supreme manifestation never vanishes. It belongs to the internal energy of the Supreme Lord and exists eternally. When the eternal manifestation is withdrawn, the spiritual activities in Goloka and the rest of the Vaikunthas continue, unrestricted by material time, which has no existence in the spiritual world. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita 15.6, it is said, Yadgatvana nivartante tadhama paramam mama. The abode from which no one returns to this material world is the supreme abode of the Lord.
Rite ritam yat pariyate pratiyate na pratiyeta chatmani tad vidyad atmano mayam yatha bhasho yatha tama. What appears to be truth without me is certainly my illusionary energy, for nothing can exist without me. It is like a reflection of the real light of the shadows, for in the light there is neither shadows nor reflections. Purport. In the previous verse, the absolute truth and its nature have been explained. One must also understand the relative truth to actually know the absolute. The relative truth, which is called Maya or material nature, is explained here. Maya has no independent existence. One which is less intelligent is captivated by the wonderful activities of Maya, but he does not understand that behind these activities is the direction of the Supreme Law. In the Bhagavad Gita 9.10, it is said, Maya Dyakshena Prakriti Suyate Sa Characharam. The material nature is working and producing moving and non-moving objects, non-moving beings only by the provision of only by the supervision of Krishna. The real nature of Maya, the illusionary existence of the material manifestation, is clearly explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. The absolute truth is substance, and the relative truth depends on its relationship with the absolute or its existence. Maya means energy. Therefore, the relative truth is explained to be the energy of the absolute truth. Since it is difficult to understand the distinction between the absolute and relative truths, an analogy can be given for clarification. The absolute truth can be compared to the sun, which is appreciated in terms of two relative truths, reflection and darkness. The darkness is the absence of sunshine, and the reflection is a projection of the sunlight into darkness. Neither darkness nor reflection has an independent existence. Darkness comes when the sunshine is blocked. For example, if one stands facing the sun, his back will be in darkness. Since darkness stands in the absence of the sun, it is therefore relative to the sun. The spiritual world is compared to the real sunshine, and the material world is compared to the dark regions where the sun is not visible. When the material manifestation appears very wonderful, this is due to a perverted reflection of the supreme sunshine, the absolute truth, as confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra. Whatever one can see here has its substance in the absolute. As darkness is situated far away from the sun, so the material world is also far away from the spiritual world. The Vedic literature directs us not to be captivated by the dark regions, tamaha, but to try to reach the shining regions of the absolute, yogi dhamma. The spiritual world is brightly illuminated, but the material world is wrapped in darkness. In the material world, sunshine, moonshine, or different kinds of artificial light are required to dispel darkness, especially at night. For by nature, the material world is dark. Therefore, the Supreme Lord has arranged for sunshine and moonshine. But in his abode, as described in the Bhagavad Gita 15.6, there is no necessity for lighting by sunshine, moonshine, or electricity because everything is self-effulgent. That what is relative, temporary, and far away from the absolute truth is called Maya or ignorance. This illusion is exhibited in two ways, as explained in the Bhagavad Gita. The inferior illusion is inert matter, and the superior illusion is the living entity. The living entities are called illusionary in this context only because they are implicated in the illusionary structures and activities of the material world. Actually, the living entities are not illusionary, the living entities are not illusionary, for they are parts of the superior energy of the Supreme Lord and do not have to be covered by Maya if they do not want to be so. The actions of the living entities in the spiritual kingdom are not illusionary. The actions of the living entities in the spiritual kingdom are not illusionary. They are the actual eternal activities of liberated souls.
No, I see. Thank you.
Tamahanti bhutani bhuteshu chavracheshvanu pravishtanya pavrishtani tatateshu nateshvaham. As the material elements enter the bodies of all living beings and yet remain outside of them all, I exist within all material creations and yet am not within them. Purport. The gross material elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, combined with the subtle material elements, mind, intelligence, and false ego, to construct the bodies of this material world. And yet they are beyond these bodies as well. Any material construction is nothing but an amalgamation or combination of material elements in varied proportions. These elements exist both within and beyond the body. For example, although the sky exists in space, it also enters within the body. Similarly, the Supreme Lord, who is the cause of the material energy, lives within the material world, as well as beyond it. Without his presence within the material world, the cosmic body could not develop. Just as without the presence of the spirit within the physical body, the body could not develop. The entire material manifestation develops and exists because the Supreme Personality of Godhead enters it as Paramatma, or the Supersoul. The Personality of Godhead, in his all-pervading feature of Paramatma, enters every entity, from the biggest to the most minute. His existence can be realized by one who has the single qualification of submissiveness and who thereby becomes a surrendered soul. The development of submissiveness is the cause of proportionate spiritual realization, by which one can ultimately meet the Supreme Lord in person, as a man meets another man face to face. Because of his development of transcendental attachment for the Supreme Lord, a surrendered soul feels the presence of his beloved everywhere, and all his senses are engaged in the loving service of the Lord. His eyes are engaged in seeing the beautiful couple, Sri Radha and Krishna, sitting on a decorated throne beneath a desire tree in the transcendental land of Vrindavan. His nose is engaged in smelling the spiritual aroma of the lotus feet of the Lord. Similarly, his ears are engaged in hearing messages from Vaikuntha, and his hands embrace the lotus feet of the Lord and his associates. Thus the Lord is manifested to a pure devotee from within and without. This is one of the mysteries of the devotional relationship, in which a devotee and the Lord are bound by a tie of spontaneous love. To achieve this love should be the goal of life for every living being.
Et etavad eva jnyan syam tatva jnasunatama anvaya vaitre kapayam yatshyat sarvatra sarvada. Translation: a person interested in transcendental knowledge must therefore always directly and indirectly inquire about it to know the all-pervading truth. Those who are serious about the knowledge of the transcendental world, which is far beyond the material cosmic creation, must approach a bona fide spiritual master to learn the science both directly and indirectly. One must learn both the means to approach the desired destination and the hindrances to such progress. The spiritual master knows how to regulate the habits of a neophyte disciple, and therefore a serious student must learn the science in all its aspects from him. There are different grades and standards of prosperity. The standard of comfort and happiness conceived by a common man engaged in material labor is the lowest grade of happiness, for it is in relationship with the body. The highest standard of such bodily comfort is achieved by a prudent worker who, by pious activities, reaches the plane of heaven or the kingdom of the creative gods with their delegated powers. The conception of comfortable life in heaven is insignificant compared to the happiness enjoyed in the impersonal Brahman, and this Brahmananda The spiritual bliss derived from impersonal Brahman is like the water in the hoofprint of a calf compared to the ocean of love of Godhead. When one develops pure love for the Lord, he derives an ocean of transcendental happiness from the association with the personality of Godhead. To qualify oneself to reach this stage of life is the highest perfection. One should try to purchase a ticket to go back home, back to Godhead. The price of such a ticket is one's intense desire for it, which is not easily awakened, even if one continuously performs pious activities for thousands of lives. All mundane relationships are sure to be broken in the course of time. But once one establishes a relationship with the personality of Godhead in a particular rasa, it is never to be broken even after the annihilation of the material world. One should understand through the transparent medium of the spiritual master that the Supreme Lord exists everywhere in his transcendental spiritual nature, and that the living entity's relationship with the Lord are directly and indirectly existing everywhere, even in this material world. In the spiritual world, there are 5 kinds of relationships with the Supreme Lord: Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. Perverted reflections of these rasas are found in the material world: land, home, furniture, and other inert material objects, and are related to Shanta, or the neutral or and silent sense, whereas servants work in the Dasya relationship. The reciprocation between friends is called Sakya. The affection of a parent or a child is known as Vatsalya, and the affairs of conjugal love constitutes Madhurya. These 5 relationships in the material world are distorted reflections of the original pure sentiments, which should be understood and perfected in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. In the material world, the perverted rasas bring frustration. If these rasas are reestablished with Lord Krishna, the result is eternal blissful life. From this and the preceding 3 verses of Chaitanya Charitamrita, which have been selected from Srimad Bhagavatam, the missionary activities of Lord Chaitanya can be understood. Srimad Bhagavatam has 18,000 verses, which are summarized in the 4 verses beginning with Aham Evasam Evagre and concluding with Yat Sarvatra Sarvada. In the first of these verses, the transcendental. In the first of these verses, 53, the transcendental nature of Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality Godhead, is explained. The second verse further explains that the Lord is detached from the workings of the material energy, Maya. The living entities, although parts and parcels of Lord Krishna, are prone to be controlled by the external energy. Therefore, although they are spiritual in the material world, they are encased in bodies of material energy. The eternal relationship of the living entities with the Supreme Lord is explained in that verse. The next verse, 55, instructs that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his inconceivable energies, is simultaneously one with and different from the living entities and the material energy. This knowledge is called Chintya Vedabhed Tattva. When an individual living entity surrenders to the Supreme Lord Krishna, he can then develop natural transcendental love for him. This surrendering process should be the primary concern of a human being. In the next verse 56, it is said that a conditioned soul must ultimately approach a bona fide spiritual master and try to understand perfectly the material and spiritual worlds and his own existential position. Hear the words Anbaya Vaiture Kab Yam directly and indirectly suggests that one must learn the process of devotional service in its two aspects. One must directly execute the process of devotional service and indirectly avoid the impediments to progress.
Chintamanir Jayati Samagirir Gurur Me Shiksha Guruscha Bhagavan Shikipin Shamalihi Yatpada Kalpataru Palava Shekareshu Lila Sayambara Rasam Labate Jayashri. All glories to Chintamani and my initiating spiritual master Somagiri. All glories to my instructing spiritual master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who wears peacock feathers in his crown under the shade of his lotus feet, which are like desire trees. Jaya Shri Radharani enjoys the transcendental mellow of an eternal consort. Purport. This verse is from the Krishna Karnamrita, which was written by a great Vaishnava sannyasi named Bilvamangala Thakur, who is also known as Leela Shuka. He intensely desired to enter into the eternal pastimes of the Lord, and he lived at Vrindavan for 700 years in the vicinity of Brahmakund, a still existing bathing tank in Vrindavan. The history of Bilvamangala Thakur is given in a book called Sri Vallabha Digbijay. He appeared in the 8th century of the Shaka era in the province of Dravida and was the chief disciple of Vishnu Swami. In a list of temples and monasteries kept in Shankaracharya's monastery in Dwarka, Bilvamangala is mentioned as the founder of the Dwarkadish temple there. He entrusted the service of his deity to Hari Brahmachari, a disciple of Vallabha Bhatta. Bilvamangala Thakur actually entered into the transcendental pastimes of Lord Krishna. He has recorded his transcendental experiences and appreciation in the book known as Krishna Karnamrita. In the beginning of that book, he has offered his obeisances to his different gurus, and it is to be noted that he has adorned them all equally. The first spiritual master mentioned is Chintamani, who was one of his instructing spiritual masters, because she first showed him the spiritual path. Chintamani was a prostitute with whom Bilvamangala was intimate earlier in his life. She gave him the inspiration to begin on the path of devotional service, and because she convinced him to give up material existence to try for perfection by loving Krishna, he has first offered his respects to her. Next, he offers his respects to his initiating spiritual master, Somagiri, and then to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who was also his instructing spiritual master. He explicitly mentions Bhagavan, who has peacock feathers on his crown, because the Lord of Vrindavan, Krishna, the cowherd boy, used to come to Bilvamangala to talk with him and supply him with milk. In his adoration of Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, he states that Jai Shri, the goddess of fortune, Srimati Radharani, takes shelter in the shade of his lotus feet to enjoy the transcendental rasa of nuptial love. The complete treatise, Krishna Karnamrita, is dedicated to the transcendental pastimes of Sri Krishna and Srimati Radharani. It is a book to be read and understood by the most elevated devotees of Sri Krishna. Jive Sakshat Nahi Tate Guru Chaitya Rupe Shiksha Guru Hoy Krishna Mahanta Sarupe. Since one cannot visually experience the presence of the Supersoul, he appears before us as a liberated devotee. Such a spiritual master is none other than Krishna himself. Purport. It is not possible for a conditioned soul to directly meet Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But if one becomes a sincere devotee and seriously engages in devotional service, Lord Krishna sends an instructing spiritual master to show him favor and invoke his dormant propensity for serving the Supreme. The preceptor appears before the external senses of the fortunate conditioned soul, and at the same time the devotee is guided from within by the Chaitya Guru, Krishna, who is seated as the spiritual master within the heart of the living entity. 659. Tato dushangam utsrujya satsu sajeta buddhiman santa evasya chindanti manovyasangam uktabi.
One should therefore avoid bad company and associate only with devotees. With their realized instructions, such saints can cut the knot connecting one with activities unfavorable to devotional service. Purport: This verse, which appears in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:26-26, was spoken by Lord Krishna to Uddhava in the text known as the Uddhava Gita. The discussion relates to the story of Pururava and the heavenly courtesan Urvashi. When Urvashi left Pururava, he was deeply affected by the separation and had to learn to overcome his grief. It is indicated that to learn the transcendental science, it is imperative that one avoid the company of undesirable persons and always seek the company of saints and sages who are able to impart lessons of transcendental knowledge. The potent words of such realized souls penetrate the heart, thereby eradicating all misgivings accumulated through years of undesirable association. For a neophyte devotee, there are two kinds of persons whose association is undesirable. One, gross materialists who constantly engage in sense gratification, and unbelievers who do not serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but serve their senses and their mental whims in terms of their speculative habits. Intelligent persons seeking transcendental realization should very scrupulously avoid their company. Shri Chaitanya Chaitamrita Ki Jai.
1. The Spiritual Master.